Hi there, welcome to video number 2, looking at how I'm going to use my X-Touch Mini almost as if it's in MC, Mackie mode. If you saw my introductory video, I was frustrated by only having 2 layers. For one particular aircraft I wanted to program up, I needed more layers so I could have essentially more rotaries to turn. And according to documentation, MC mode, this Mackie mode, provides you with, it says in the manual, infinite number of layers. And I wondered how that worked. I wondered how that was going to happen, and could I find a way of making this work for us? I've done a lot of discoveries and find out that the MC mode doesn't really work, but there is a way of making it, emulating it, making it work for us. But I thought if I just explain to you how MC mode actually does work, and how Axis knows sees it, and then how I can get around the problems. So let's have a look at what's going on here. So I'm just going to show you what happens in standard mode, so we understand the standard way that the X-Touch works, and then we'll look at Mackie mode and then see how we can emulate what we want to happen. So if I was going to allocate to a function and something, an event here, to this first rotary, if I turn that rotary clockwise, you'll see that it's worked out what I've turned, and this button is labeled 2001. And the first move, it just says, oh, you moved it. It sees it's a click. If I carry on turning it in that direction, it works out that I've turned it right. If I turn anti-clockwise, it sees that I turned it left. But the important thing is that it's addressed it. The address has come from X-Touch into here as 3001. If I turn this one here, it's just a different address for each one. So they're all addressed separately. Same with the buttons. If I press buttons, each button has its own address. And the slider here basically treats it as a rotary. So it thinks I'm turning it left or turning it right, and I slide it up and down. And again, this address number has changed. If I go over here to the layer button, so if I press layer B, nothing gets sent out from the X-Touch to Axis and O's. Everything is happening internally here. If I go back to layer A and turn rotary 1, as you remember, this was 3001. If I change here, it's just effectively readdressed it as 3011, 3012. So it's just changing the addressing number in here. Axis and O's has absolutely no idea that I've changed layers. That's why we're restricted to layer A and layer B. It just sees this as one device with 16 rotaries and double the number of buttons. That's all. It's just like an internal wiring thing that's happened. So that's the restriction that we've got, but it works. Everything works fine for us in sort of normal mode. Okay, let's have a look at the MC, the Mackie mode. Now, changing this device into Mackie mode, there are 2 ways of doing it. The first one is just to hold the MC button down while we power on, and that will put it into Mackie mode, and this light will light up. And it will stay in that mode with this power off and power on. It will remember that you wanted it in Mackie mode until you power on with that button held down, and it will toggle it back into standard mode. The other way is to send a code across to it. So let's talk about the structure of this code. I want to send the value 1 across the MIDI to device number 3. Now I know that it's device number 3 because if I look in my hardware list and ask it to show me the MIDI devices, it knows here that it's been allocated ID 3, and that's a Windows allocation. Windows has given it the ID 3. We've got no control over that. If you haven't got lots of MIDI devices being plugged and unplugged, then this remains pretty much stable as far as I can work out. I've got another computer that I use, and it's got a number of MIDI devices connected to it, and Windows can allocate these differently depending on what's plugged in and not plugged in at the time, which is a bit of a pain because we don't know that. If you write scripts, then and it's all based on ID3 and suddenly it becomes ID6, you'd have to rewrite the scripts. Just doesn't be any way around it. You can't hard allocate them like you can with an IP address or something. You can hard allocate them. You can't do that with this. But if most users, that once you've worked out what the ID number is, it's going to stay the same. So anyway, across MIDI to device number 3, we're going to send a control change over channel 1. There are a number of MIDI channels, but number 1 is global. Every device on your system, every MIDI device will hear a message going over channel 1, but only respond if it's got the right ID number. And we're sending it to register number 27. So everything here's got its own address, and there is no hardware part that's addressed as 127. 127 is an internal register there. If it's got a 1 in it, it's in Mackie mode. So that's what I want to send across. So I want to turn on the Mackie mode. When I press this test button here, it should send that across, and the MC light's on, and we're now in Mackie mode. Okay, so what does it look like? What does axes and O's see? Well, again, we'll start off by turning this first rotary, and you'll see that it's detected everything. It's given it an address. But as I turn it continually to the right, it still just sees it as a click. Nothing is happening here. It's not saying, oh, you've turned it right. If I continue turning to the right, eventually it usually gives in and says, okay, you've turned it. Ah, did you see it said turn to the right and then turn to the left? And I was turning it constantly to the right, but it doesn't read the values properly. It thinks I'm turning it right and then turning left. Now if I turn it anti-clockwise, it now thinks I've turned it to the right. And keep going anti-clockwise, and now it goes left. So it's useless, the Mackie mode for us. But just so you know what's going on in Mackie mode, let's have a look at a few other bits and pieces. If I press and click on the end here, it registers the clicks. And let's press this top left hand button here. Let's register that as button number 89. This one here it sees as a rotary as before, but these buttons here have changed. If I press for layer B, this time something has been transmitted. It's transmitted event 85, and layer A has transmitted 84. So in theory, we can pick up that we've asked for a change to happen in X's and O's. But interesting, if I press on this button here, that's 89, change layers, press it again, it's still 89. You change the rotary, it's still the same address as it ever was. So changing these buttons here doesn't change the address here. Nothing happens inside here. It's all going to happen back in X's and O's, where we register there's been a change of layer, and we have to handle that with our own variables to make that work. Okay, so that gives us a clue for the fact that this doesn't give us infinite number of layers. It's my programming that gives me the infinite number of layers, and this just tells it to change layers. So what I want to do now is to go back into standard mode and talk about how I'm going to deal with that. What I'm going to do is to talk about the LEDs and how we can control those. Most importantly in standard mode, but I will also tell you about Mackie mode so that you know it if you want it. Finding this information is very difficult, so I just think it's important to share it so that you've got full knowledge of what goes on in your gear. But if you want to ditch out of the video now and you don't want to see the rest of it, there you go. Okay, so let's get out of here, and I'm going to put it back into standard mode. So in theory, I should be able to just send a 0 across. So I edit this here now and send a 0, click on test here, and you should see the lights change. We're back in standard mode. It is in standard mode, it will register correctly, but something is weird with the LEDs inside here. So unfortunately, we do need to power off and power on again. It doesn't seem to register that change. It readdresses the buttons, but it doesn't seem to readdress the LEDs properly. So if we power it off and power it on again, I'm not holding it down any buttons, I'm just recycling it. So that's number one. Number two is to tell X's and O's to look again at the MIDI device. Otherwise the LEDs don't work particularly well. It does get confused. Anyway, we're back in now. We can work with this. So let's talk about controlling the LEDs in standard mode. First thing I want to be able to control are the LEDs around the rings on here. And we can control, we've got two things we have to control. Firstly, there's this mode of how we want it displayed. So if I turn the knobs, it's kind of lighting up. Well, it says single mode. It should be one LED at a time. But when we're sort of halfway between values, normally this would count this as 0 to 100, but we've only got so many LEDs to light. So if you're like at halfway points in between two values, it will light up too. But it will stay starting off here in this mode here, which is sort of a standard single mode. If we can address each one of these rings separately. This is rotary 1, rotary 2, rotary 3. So let's bring in a bit of code for us here. Just for the sake of the camera, I'm going to address ring number 4, and at the moment it's in mode 0, which is lighting up essentially one ring at a time. If I put it into mode 1, which it calls pan mode, I don't think it's any different. It looks pretty much the same to me. Let's put it into mode 2 and we'll set that across. It's now in fan mode. And we'll set it into 3, which it calls spread mode. So what it does is, if I try to keep my hand out of the way, I turn this, you'll see that it kind of spreads the rings out. And the last one is what it calls trim mode. So that's the center value here. Then it works its way to the left or to the right of the center bit there. Okay, I'm not really worried about those modes, to be honest. What I tend to do is just to turn all of the lights on, all the lights off. I use it to remind myself which mode. So I program it so that when I press this button here, it'll toggle between two modes. So for instance, this might be the radio, it might be doing megahertz when it's in one mode. Press it again, it does kilohertz, and I want it to tell me which mode it's in. I'm going to put that back to the normal sort of mode 0 now. Okay, so if you want to, you can change the appearance. What you really want to change is the values that you're sending to it. So what it does is, it rather than being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 8, if we then start sending it to 9, 10, 11, 12, same command, but with starting at 9, we can send different values to it. So if I send anything between 1 and 13, that turns on either the right number of LEDs or the right segment, the correct segment for us. Let's try turning one of those on if I can find my pointer. Yeah. Okay. So this will be 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm going to address number 12. And I'm going to send the value 3 to it. And you can see it's lit up the third segment there. If I send something in this range here, it will make that segment blink. So let's send it a 17. And you can see the segment is now blinking. If I send it 27, which is what I normally send to it, basically that turns everything on, and that's what I really want to see. So I tend to send a 0 to turn it off and a 27 to turn it on. If you send a 28, all the LEDs will come on blinking if we really want to catch someone's attention. So it doesn't matter what mode you're in, whether you're in fan or spread or trim, send 27 or 28, or in this case 0, turn them all on, turn them all off. That makes much more sense. The buttons themselves are a bit easier to work with. That again, rather than a CC, a control change, we're going to send a note on. It's as if you pressed a note on a piano, and this is the volume, the velocity that you hit the key with, and it really sees that you've got 3 velocities. 0 means the note will be off, 1 will turn it on, and 2 will make it blink. The only catch on this one is that they are whereas the rotary starters 1, the first button starts here 0, 1, 2, 3 up to 15. So let's bring in some scripting for that. Let me find a button in standard mode. Here we go. So I'm going to send a 0 across MIDI, a note on event to button 0 as far as it's concerned. That will make sure it's turned off. If I want to turn it on, I send a 1 to it, and that's now on. If I send a 2 to it, let's get it out of the way. Send a 2, and now it's blinking. So that's the control we've got over the LEDs in standard mode. We'll test that. So that works absolutely fine. Just for information then, on Mackie modes, we're not going to use it, but the Mackie mode is different. When we were controlling the rings around the rotaries in standard mode, we had 1 to 9, so 1 to 8 to control, and we can control the mode, and then addressing it 9 to 16 address the value. This one here just works with the value. If the value is in the range 1 to 11, it just turns on a single segment between 1 and 11. If you use the range 17 to 27, it uses a trim pattern. If it's in this range here, the 33 to 43 is a fan pattern. If it's 49 to 54, use a spread pattern. So it combines the two modes when you're in Mackie mode for that to happen. So the addressing is slightly odd. It's 48, 49, 50 up to 55 for the LED rings. So it's slightly simplified. In fact, you don't have to think about each thing having 2 allocations to it. It's one for mode, one for value. You just combine the 2. in your command there. The LEDs, same sort of idea. We're going to send a note on rather than a CC, and we're going to send a value across to it. The values are different. That sending a 0 turns it off, and sending a 1 makes it blink. To make it turn on, we have to set this value to 127. There's no values in between. There's no idea of dimming or brightening. It's just off, blink, and on. And the addressing is really odd. 89, 90, then 40, up to 45, then 87, 88, 91. And these buttons here, if you want to light those up, that's 84 and 85. But as I said, we're not really going to use Mackie mode at all. But this information is really hard to find on the internet. It took quite a while to try to find it all. So I thought I'd just pass it on so that you're one of the few people in the world now who know this. Made even worse by the fact that Behringer seems to have be rewriting their website. A number of days it's been offline completely, and their support is now moved over to an AI chatbot, and it can't find anything. It can't find the manuals. It can't find any technical help. It's pretty awful, to be honest now. So I'm glad I've captured this just a few days before it all disappeared. Anyway, thanks for watching, and what I'll do is I will then explain to you how I'm going to emulate Mackie mode with the X-Touch in standard mode, knowing that these buttons aren't going to work for me, and I'll show you the way around that. Okay, thanks for watching.